So this afternoon's talk, we'll have a panel of experienced keen birders, semi-professional, I'd say, because they've been doing it a long while, and that includes Peter McAllister and Kathleen Mazer and John Neville, and myself being the least experienced of the group. So they should be showing on your screen there, or when they talk, you should be able to hear them talking. So thank you to all three of you for joining us today as the presenter panel. And I'd like also to acknowledge the photographers. These are keen photographers. I'm keen, so I'm happy to talk about it. And these photographs that you'll see today are largely, almost entirely, photographed on the island or in the waters around here by Farley, David, Peter, and Ren Ferguson. So thank you for those. So if you're excited to get out to watch winter birds, you'll probably want to take a field guide, and you can possibly use an app on your computer or your phone. Take those with you. They would be helpful. Get some binoculars, and we'll have a little bit of talking about binoculars probably in the spring. And if you do have the list that I sent around, have a print of that, because one of the great things value that this has is it limits you to 100 birds that you're most likely to see out of the 750 birds that your guidebook has. So it's a really useful item to take with you. The first group is the loons and the grebes. And maybe, is Peter going to take over on that one?
No, that's
Kathleen.
I'm just waiting for the picture, David, to appear.
It's not on yet?
No.
Uh-oh, this is not good because I have it on mine. How about anybody else?
Nope.
No, we don't.
We were going too fast. What do you have? Do you have anything now?
We have your first slide.
Part one.
Oh, I've just gone through all the slides and you didn't see any of them.
No.
Oh, boy. Oh, it seems to be saying that my screen sharing is paused. This is really getting exciting here. Okay.
Oh.
Now we're on the list.
You're on the list?
Yep.
Okay, I apologize.
Here we are.
All
And
right.
I can start in there. Okay, well, it's really a delight to be here with everyone. And we begin this webinar with the iconic species, the common loon. And this is a spectacular bird. There's no doubt about it, especially in the summertime, the breeding season. And for any and all of us who've been anywhere else in Canada, we know how beautiful and how that still night on a lake, on the ocean, and you can hear that gorgeous sound. We see them commonly here in the winter, and the picture on the right will show you how different they are in the winter. It loses the bright contrasting white and black colors, but it is the largest of the loons and the commons. It is a large bird. They're offshore away, but quite visible, and pretty much on any of our shores and any of our straits and channels around Salt Spring Island, they can be seen. Peter, you're next.
All right, here we go with the smaller loons. Now the Pacific loon on the left, both of these loons are noticeably smaller than the common loon. And the Pacific loon has been cited. I'm going to refer to some notes because I don't want to go over this 45 seconds or I'm going to be cut off by David. And some of my notes do not coincide with the notes for all of the birds we're going to talk about today. And I don't know who wrote those up, but I have to challenge some of them in my notes. But anyway, as far as the Pacific loon goes, it's been cited every year on the Christmas bird count. And until 1999, there were as many as 141 on some of the counts. He's stockier than the red-throated loon, and he has a noticeable gray nape. It's even grayer and richer than the Pacific loon shown there. It's quite noticeable in the water. And right next door to us, in active pass, I've counted thousands of them at any one time during the winter. Now, the red-throated loon, he's slender and has almost an upturned bill, very thin bill, and a white face, as you can see in the winter. That's quite noticeable. And almost every year there are sightings of them.
Pie-billed grebe, a sweet little bird, very small. Now you can see the pie bill there. You can see the black line across the bill. Now this disappears in the winter. So it's just a general coloration then on the bill, and it's a small bird. Can be seen also on inland waterways, on ponds and lakes. All by itself usually. You don't usually see them with others, and off the coast too. So a very small grebe, pretty little guy. Now the horned grebe and the eared grebe. So the horned grebe is a little bit bigger than the eared grebe, and the eared grebe is honestly very rarely seen around Salt Spring. Is the horned grebe on the left on your screen. You can see the line that goes across. This is a distinctive diagnostic line that goes across that eye to the back. That's much more marked than it is on the eared. The horned grebe a little bit larger. And off our waters, like the common loon, we will see, if you go down to just about any shore, you'll see 2, 3. They tend to kind of hang out in little groups of 3, perhaps, but not bigger than that. Or sometimes they're all alone and diving up and down into the waters, but all around our shores on pretty much from any beach.
Oh, I just want to add a few things to the eared and the horned. We actually have records on the CBC almost every year of eared grebes. So we are counting them, and since 1989, almost every year there are a few, although we've never seen them when we're out on the boat. And as far as the horned grebe goes, when we're out on the boat counting them, which we do every month, doing our Birds Canada monthly water bird count, we come across flocks of them in the hundreds. And anytime you go out in the winter in a boat, you'll count hundreds of them. And you don't have to get too close to identify them, because they're always getting up in front of the boat, and they have a very floppy, weak flight, and they just barely clear the water as they scoot away from us. And it's actually the easiest way to identify them.
Mm-hmm.
I should add, Peter, thank you for that. And I should add to everyone that the CBC is the Christmas bird count, in case anyone doesn't know. And it's coming up in just a couple of weeks. And we'll be talking about that at the end. There's a perhaps opportunity for you to be involved if you haven't before. So I just thought I'd point that out.
So I think I'm doing the redneck grebe, and there's probably less than 10 that are reported almost every year since 1989, and they're declining in numbers. They're little chunkier than the western grebe and a little smaller. And you'll always see a few out there. Never very many. Often when I do my winter counts, maybe 1 or 2 on the entire inner and outer Ganges Harbor all the way to Prevost. The western grebe, tall, thin, slender neck, very diagnostic. You can't miss it. Much larger than the horned grebe, and sadly in great decline, but possibly not in numbers, but they just don't like it here. The reason is that since 1989, or back then, and for the next 10 years, there were counts of up to 5,000 on the Christmas bird count. But in the last 20 years, the numbers have dropped off dramatically, and only 5, 10, 15, or 20, a few more sometimes have been counted. The reason is, no doubt, we've lost our forage fish, our sand lance and surf smelt and herring, and these guys have all gone to California in the winter.
Peter, I was going to ask, Pierre has asked if the eye color, the red eye of the Western grebe is characteristic as well.
No, that color, no, that question, David, was for the previous slide.
Okay.
Oh, well,
It was the horn versus eared.
they both have red eyes.
Well, the eared was a little bit more yellow, but yeah.
No, it depends on what field guide you use, but generally they're both red.
Okay, thanks.
And generally, you're not close enough to see the eye color also when we're out in the boats. Another thing too, with this slide here with the redneck grebe and the Western grebe, so low in the water, the body is low in the water. And that is because with the loons and grebes, the legs are attached towards the rump of these birds. And they're very powerful swimmers, and especially when they're diving. And so the body is low in the water, unlike many of our ducks.
Oh, one more thing. Go to YouTube and punch out Western grebe, and you will see the most spectacular dancing birds on earth.
That's true. But yeah. Okay, the cormorants are 3 species, and we're going to start here with the double-crested cormorant, the largest of them. And that hook bill, the hook on the end of the bill, is characteristic of the cormorants. They have, in this particular one, you can see the face skin is yellow, even orange. This would probably be a breeding bird. Paler yellow in the wintertime. That's called a Gullar Pouch, which is quite yellow and definitely distinguishes it from the other 2 cormorants. So it's our largest cormorant. It can fly. It's the one that's most commonly seen flying across land. The other 2 don't seem to do that. And of course, being a diving bird and going after fish, it is interesting that this particular one, their plumage gets quite wet and damp, and they have to, when they come out after a period of time, they find a perching spot, a stump, anything, I mean a wharf, and then extend their wings. And I expect that you've seen that particular view of a cormorant. Here's another one, double-crested, yeah.
Again, low in the water, like the grebes.
Very much so. Mm-hmm. And sinking as it stays in the water because that plumage gets quite wet.
Aha, now there's something you won't see here very often in the summer. This is the Brandt's cormorant. He's a real beauty, and you'll find him on Mandarte Island, down at the south end of the Gulf Islands, and on their breeding, and the biggest water bird breeding colony in the Gulf Islands. Only small numbers breeding, but here in the winter, they are now. Is there a picture of a winter?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so, Peter.
Okay, well, that's my fault because I should have given you one. They're actually quite common here, although they're not reported that often. because they're quite territorial in the winter. Pierre will be able to scope them on the buoys and the outer Ganges harbor. Even if he just sees what looks vaguely like a cormorant, I can guarantee that on the 3 buoys in front of him, almost every available space on those buoys, the crossbars and so forth, are branch cormorants. And once in a while, they'll allow a pelagic to squeeze in. And they're easy to identify because they're the largest cormorant. They're even larger than double-crested. And they're quite dark, all dark in the winter, mostly all dark. And the only thing that you'll notice, which is quite diagnostic, is a pale yellow throat patch. In other words, that pale yellow throat patch be in front of the Gullar Pouch or behind the Gullar Pouch is all you'll see. And it's even smaller than that, but it's easy to see them. In active pass, I can count thousands at a time this time of year.
And these are the
Pelagic.
Is that, I think that's Kathleen.
that you, Kathleen.
No, Peter, I think it's yours, but I can start out on these. I love the coloration. You have there's a little bit of green in that blue, and they're the smaller of the 3 cormorants. Reddish just at the base. The Gullar Pouch there is a little bit red, not always easily seen in the winter time. They can be mixed up sometimes with a double-crested down at the Vesuvius docks, for example, but also on the pilings you'll get sometimes they separate into their 2 species, and the double-crested will be flying by, and the pelagic seem to be sort of sitting there. Yeah, just smaller. Peter, got something to say there?
Yes, they're definitely much more slender than the double-crested, and yeah, we've got to get some better pictures or some different pictures, because one of the best ways to identify them for a good part of the year are these big white rump patches on either side of the rump. Oh, there, that's good. Now, they're also these cormorants are very class conscious. On Mandardi Island, where all 3 cormorants nest, the double-crested are at the top of the cliffs exclusively. They don't allow any other cormorants near there. The middle of the cliffs are exclusively pelagic cormorants, middle and lower. And one section of Mandardi Island is devoted exclusively to the branch cormorants. They're all very territorial, even when they're in their breeding colonies.
It's striking to see that.
The brants are what we're most likely to see during the Christmas bird count.
John, are there any differences in the vocalizations of the 3?
There are, but this time of year, they're actually silent, David. They're only vocalizing on the nest sites, like at Mandarti. So most people won't get a chance to go to Mandarti, but if you go there, or the cliffs in Galliano or other places they nest, you will hear them, but that's in the spring and the summertime.
Great.
Yes, we do. By the way, the pelagic and the double-crested do have nesting colonies, as John said, right across on Galliano Island. The Bilingual Islands on this side facing John's house, on the other side of Trincomalee Channel, was a major nesting site in the junipers, but the junipers all died and fell apart, and the cormorants have disappeared from that island.
All right, here's where I come back in. And the great blue heron is the bird that I'm going to start with. this is a magnificent bird, and it's the one that for the rest of the world and North America, exotic places like Africa and further south Central America, there are cranes and there are herons and there are egrets and there are many varieties, many colorful ones, but we have this stately blue heron. And note, this would be a bird, I'm breeding their back plume. You have that dark stripe across, going from the eye to the back of the head, and then that black plume out from the back. Truly a beautiful bird, and a great hunter, a great fisher, as I'm sure you've all seen. Anywhere around Salt Spring, you will come across a great blue heron. Here we go. Wow. And if I'm sure many of us have taken that ferry over to Sawasan, and just to the left, to the north, as you're driving off, if the tide is at the right height, or you can see probably up to 100, and many of them are fishing, and they're all at a certain angle, leaning over. An amazing bird. Our great blue heron.
I might add that we've generally have a few breeding colonies right here on the island, up near the tops of the trees, tight little colonies, but they disappear from time to time. We had a colony just up the creek, up Fulford Creek from the estuary, but I think they cut the trees down, and that's disappeared, that colony. And then we had a colony in recent years north of Fernwood, on a conservancy property next to the ocean. I think they're gone from there. The only one I know of is on the road going down to the sailing club, on a private property with some big maples. It's vulnerable, but there's probably 10 or so nests there, and during the nesting season, you can see them all lined up along the Walter Bay Spit, which is just south of the sailing club. They're all lined up. They're fishing all the way to Price Beach. It's really nice to see them, so many of them together.
I might add that they're nesting in Cowichan Harbor, just above the nature center there, right on Cowichan Harbor. And there's quite a good colony there, about I believe close to 100. And they're very vocal in the spring when they're nesting, but if you catch them before, you can actually see them from a road beside there quite well when they're first nesting. This time of the year, they're also often out in fields feeding on voles and mice and even frogs. So you don't necessarily always see them on the water side. They can be in the fields as well.
They make a lovely squawking sound if they're interrupted as well, David.
Yeah.
They express their displeasure at our interruption very clearly.
I've been frightened many times by that, John. Thanks.
All right, Canada goose. They are growing in numbers, growing in numbers everywhere. It's a highly successful bird. Now, there is one interesting thing. Up here where I live, at the top of Sunset, where there's a large number of fields and a couple of ponds, we are now seeing close to 300 birds, Canada geese, on a daily basis. And just 7 years ago, when I first arrived on the island, maybe there would be 100 or so, and they've gradually grown in numbers. An astonishingly successful species. We had some excitement in the last couple of days, because amongst this large group of Canada geese, we saw an immature or juvenile snow goose, and quite different in its behavior and habits. the Canada goose, they have their sentries, and those long, if that sentry says there's something to watch out for, all those black necks will come up and they'll all be looking around. And that is what happened the last time I went down, except for the snow goose, who had been had been taken in by the others. It didn't matter where he went. He wasn't being pushed to the side, but the snow goose went on foraging, eating the grass, and didn't pay any attention to these Canada geese who are on the lookout. A very safe place for the snow goose to appear.
As we come on to the Christmas bird count, Kathleen, people should take note that the geese will be starting to pair off for the breeding season next year. And generally speaking, Canada geese are monogamous, and sometimes up to 25 or 30 years.
Well,
So the mute swan, we're all familiar with him. He's got a nice orange bill, unlike the trumpeter swan with the black bill. But the trumpeter swan, they always say he doesn't belong here, doesn't belong anywhere in North America. They just introduced him, and that's how they usually start the description of the mute swan. However, he's been in North America. They've been in North America longer than the starling, by about 50 or 60 years as an introduced species. So I don't know why we keep saying he doesn't belong here. They're actually everywhere in North America now. They're spread out all over, and we have quite a well-known population, right? A small population right here on Salt Spring. In Fulford Harbor, I only know of one pair. In the last 10 years that I've been here, I've only seen the one pair, and occasionally they don't make it, but they do nest right at the end of the Walter Bay Spit, which is just south of the Sailing Club. And once in a while they don't make it, they're not successful in raising a few youngsters because of raccoons and dogs and people walking the spit. But for a few years they disappeared, but there's a pair there right now, and you'll see a pair or so in Fulford Harbor. Fulford Harbor.
Several nesting pair right in Ganges Harbor too, and one is right there by the kayak shop that's almost always there in the early summer and spring.
I don't think they nest there though.
The chicks are pretty small when they come out there, so it's nearby, I'm sure.
Well, that's what I think the only place they can successfully nest is as Walter Bay Spit. So when the chicks are quite young, they will definitely patrol right into the mouth of the harbor. Right. And here's our trumpeter and a few pairs. Let's see. I think. Since 1989, they've been reported 18 years, and 18 years up until the present. And whenever I look for them, I go down to Fulford Harbor, and sometimes you'll see a few there in the winter.
For several years, we had a pair come into Booth Canal, spend a couple of weeks, and then head off again. But we haven't seen them for a few years. We
don't seem to have the right kind of marshy land for them to feed on in the winter. But usually when we do our count at Burgoyne Bay, we sometimes note a pair flying over.
I think they like magic mushrooms. They hang out in fields a lot up in the Courtenay area.
There are hundreds on Vancouver Island.
Yeah. And as Peter's pointed out, the main difference there, when you see them, the mutes are a bit larger, but there you can see the quite distinct difference in the head and the bill. So people should really get to know that difference because it's the key way to find them even from a distance. Ducks.
Okay, yeah, we're on to the ducks. And note as we go through the ducks, how they sit higher up on the water. The wood duck, oh my goodness. I mean, this is the most spectacular bird, truly, that we have here. Beautiful. Now not only are the colors so exciting, but in this particular picture, you're not seeing the hood raised up as it would be were that male wood duck be courting, and it just raises up and it's like a helmet over its head, and he becomes even more spectacular. Beautiful, beautiful duck. David, do you have a picture of the female also? Are we going to be able to see that? Yes, here she is. Yeah, the white eye ring on the female is so distinctive, and you can easily pick her out from amongst other females that are in ponds because of that. She's quite distinctive. Now here up in my area, they are nesting. We've had something like 3 pairs which are nesting. They will disappear up into the trees to nest and then come down with their little ducklings down into the ponds. So it's pretty exciting. As I've noted, or I did note, that they're not often seen on the count, but that surprises me because I think it was only about 3 weeks ago that I saw wood ducks up here. So maybe this year we'll be lucky and some of them will hang around a little bit longer, depending on the weather, of course.
So it's been very popular throughout North America to put up wood duck boxes because a lot of their cavities have disappeared with logging and human population densities increasing. So on Salt Spring, Tony McLeod and I have put up wood duck boxes in a lot of the conservancy properties on the ponds and up in the trees. And we've had some success. And Kathleen is right about their propensity to nest, not necessarily next to the water. At our ranch up in the interior, we would put up wood duck boxes anywhere in the woods, even a kilometer from the creeks and ponds, and it's really delightful to see a mother with a whole bunch of babies, ducklings, following her, trundling through the marching through the woods and fields for a kilometer all the way down to the creek. And also they may nest in a cavity. I've got nesting boxes 30, 40 feet up in trees at our farm in the Fraser Valley. And when it's time for the ducklings to leave the nest, out they come one by one, and they flutter all the way to the ground, and it may be a 30 or 40 foot drop, and they just bounce and off they go.
Yeah.
Just a comment, Mark Grosswood pointed out that his Sibley's field guide suggests that the wood duck is an eastern species and not found here. What would be the reason for that confusion by the Sibley field guide? Anybody?
I find that, who knows, maybe John, you've got an answer to that?
Well, I was just wondering if it was an eastern field guide.
David, you've got an eastern field guide.
All of North America.
Of course.
Yeah, certainly on the prairies also.
So,
Yeah.
so the answer to the question there is really that it probably the field guide is just localized and nope, that's the Western Field Guide, says Mark. So well, bring it around. We're hoping to meet Mark one of these days, so bring it around and we'll see what we can figure out. But thanks for pointing that out. Okay, we'll go on to the next group.
Yeah, the American widgeon. Such a pretty bird with the green and the white right across its head, that white stripe. Notice the bill also. This is one of the dabblers. And so it is right on top of the water. Again, look how it's floating well up. And in Fulford Bay. Fulford Bay, they're in great numbers. Just about many of the bays where they'll seek shelter, especially as the wind changes. And in this particular period through November, we've had variable winds. They will seek shelter. They are together. I often think they're sort of a quiet bird. They really like to be with others of their own kind. As birders, the great challenge though is to try and find amongst the widgeon, the Eurasian widgeon, and here he is, quite different. And the stripe going over the head is more yellow, but it's that distinctive color of the head that stands out. Interestingly enough, you know, there will be a flock of American widgeon, and in reasonable numbers, I mean 50 to 100, whatever, and you'll find amongst them, you possibly will find amongst them, but there will only be one pair. I've rarely seen in large flocks of American widgeon more than one pair of that Eurasian, but it is fun to check them out and to find that bird.
I just want to interject the one thing. David's absolutely right. In the Sibley Western Field Guide, the wood duck's range is exclusively east of the Mississippi River. And it's a major mistake by Sibley, because if you look at the range of the wood duck, I'll hold that up. Let's see, I don't know whether you can see that, but that's all across North America. That's what the range actually looks like. So I don't know what got into Sibley's mind on the wood duck.
You should maybe invite him to our program, David.
Pierre has pointed out that he has the North American Sibley Guide, and it's correct in that guide. So he's already responded to us, it seems.
All right, the mallard, the most widely recognized and widespread duck of them all. That head, I mean, usually we take one look and we say, oh, there's a mallard, not an important duck to look at. But you know, in certain lights, that spectacular head can be amazing. Just beautiful to see in different lights. And I would like you to just note the tail on the male, how it curls up on the rump. This is quite exceptional to birds of our latitude to have a decoration such as that. There are many birds in Australia and Africa and Central America, further south, where the males have, you know, curls and longer feathers, but on the rump, truly the mallard is unique up in this area. So it's take a look.
Well, you know the females designed that tail.
Right.
The northern pintail is one that is rarely seen on Salt Spring, but in the last couple of years, we've had one in Booth Canal for the Christmas bird count. So if you haven't ever seen this, you should try the bridge at Booth Canal. It's quite a great spot.
Well, you got it wrong, I guess. Or maybe it's a different talk.
And I'm not sure who's on there, but if you could please mute, that would be, or did I? This is, of course, the reason why it's called the pintail, if you just watch them feed. So I haven't seen it this year. I have seen quite a number of American widgeons out in front on Booth Canal. So if you do check the bridge out there, that's a great spot to see some of the water birds. And another favorite bird of mine We almost always have them, a few of them every year on Booth Canal, is the green-winged teal. This is one of the smallest ducks that we have on our coast. It's a lovely bird. For some reason, it's my favorite bird. It's partly because it eats mud. And as a marine biologist, mud has a real, it's dear to my heart. It's got so many different organisms living in it, so you can see how they get their energy. So it's a lovely little bird with that beautiful green eye band on the males, and of course the green parts of the wing are really outstanding. So look for those when you get a chance.
Okay, the ruddy duck. This is a rare sighting. I'm just noting that on last year's Christmas bird count, none were spotted, and I've not had the good fortune to see them here on Salt Spring, but on the prairies, this is a bird that pops up all over the place, and the blue bill of the male is much bluer than what we're seeing in this picture. It's brighter. It is diagnostic. It's exciting. You see it on the many lakes out there. Another part of the ruddy duck that's important is the tail. On that bird, the male, not the female, the tail is upright. And this serves this diving duck well when it works as a little rudder, when it's underwater. So a very interesting bird. Of course, the bird on the right is the Winter Plunge, and that's pretty dull on the whole. I note that the tail is down in this one, but possibly if you did see it, it's really the only duck that I'm aware of with a tail that is so stiff and raises up. So unlikely that we'll see it on the Christmas bird count, but keep our eyes open. And here's one we will, and this is the ringneck duck. And the obvious ring that we all note and is very clear, it distinguishes this bird from scops, is that white ring on the beak near the tip, which is black, and that stands out clearly. Probably much more commonly seen than any of the scops. And up on the inland waterways, ponds, marshes, there are a number, certainly up my way, and most likely will be seen on the count. So keep your eyes open, look for that ring. It is called a ringneck duck. For whatever reason, the ring around the neck is extremely difficult to see. They say that you really have to have the bird out and on the ground and in front of you. And that's not a possibility. So it's hard to see. You will not see it on the water. Don't look for it, but do look for that white ring. Yellow eye too.
Now we have the lesser and the greater scaup. This is one of the most confusing ducks of all. And if David can show the common scaup, the greater scaup as well, I'll just talk to both of them. They look almost virtually indistinguishable. And for good reason. Even though they say, oh yes, all you have to do is look at the head, because the greater scaup is rounder head, and their point, and the lesser scaup pointed at the back. Well, most of the time that is not visible, and I can tell you that even professionals who research the breeding scaup in the Arctic have such trouble identifying which species they've got, that they just they can't do it. It's virtually impossible. So even though if you're lucky enough to see that difference in the top of the head, be careful, because it still may not work. Both of these are commonly seen, and not only in few numbers, but in most years. The lesser scaup slightly more than the greater.
if you're not sure which, put down scope species.
Right.
Good point.
And they also, their habitat is different.
Okay, we're both on for this Harlequin duck. Peter?
Oh, well, I think the Harlequin can compete with the wood duck for spectacular coloration.
Yeah.
He's one of my favorite ducks. I can remember as a kid on Long Island out at Montauk Point, 120 miles east of New York City in the winter, amidst the icebergs or ice flows in those days. This is going back to the 40s. Occasionally we would have a Harlequin duck, and that was a mystical bird. So here we have them fairly commonly in the winter. Lots of them, not lots, but a number are reported almost every year, actually every year. And they are pretty easy to find along the rocky coast. And Kathleen, what would you like to add?
Oh, I'd like to add that they leave us. They're one of the last actual birds in the winter to leave us. And that's because they head to the Rocky Mountains right up near Jasper's, where I've seen and with yellow police tape, they cordoned off a raging river near Jasper, Molina, up in that area. And they're nesting up there. They're nesting in that water, which is normally kayakers go down, the type of water that they like, and that's where they'll nest. And so that they stay with us till late in the spring, because of course those rivers are snow covered and maybe icebound, and the spring melt hasn't yet happened. Beautiful bird, just a stunning bird.
Kathleen, you're right about the Rockies, but it's even more spectacular. They nest as far as Wyoming, and wild torrents, mountain creeks,
Yeah.
rushing water. They're absolutely amazing. And by the way, virtually the whole population of Harlequin ducks winter around the Gulf of Georgia, America.
Yeah.
Surf scoter, don't need to say too much about him. We see them all the time. That diagnostic white patch at the back of the neck is certainly quite visible, and we have them by the hundreds all winter here on the coast. Very handsome, and we'd love to see them. And they seem to be holding their own.
And Peter, what about this bird?
Well, this one has set some records. It's it nests the highest in the Arctic, as far north as you can go, more than any other waterfowl species. Even on the west coast of Greenland, to the very top of Greenland, and on the Canadian islands, which border Greenland even a little farther north. And I wish we had a vocalization. The males have a wonderful call. It's hard to explain, but it's melodious. Oh, there you go. We've got someone's got their tape.
That was fun. Fantastic, John. Thank you for that.
We see them occasionally here on the Christmas bird counts, going back many years. They seem to be holding their own, and they're farther offshore, so that if Pierre has a scope at Bettis Beach, he'll probably count a few way off out in the outer Ganges harbor.
We should point out that they're fairly rarely seen from the shore, but that's where you'd look for them. Bridget was asking where to find them. They tend to be more in the open water, except in a few places where you see them right next to shore. So if you're out in a boat there, you have a better chance, I think. The other thing I was going to point out was someone was asking where we would see surf scoters. And I know we have quite a few of them on Booth Bay in the winter bird counts. And probably you've seen them in a lot of other places. Am I right?
Yep, around Rockall Park, off in some of the bays, north end, off the shore, they're commonly seen up there.
All
Trincomalee
along
would-
Trincomalee, yes, Walker's Hook Road and Long Beach Road.
Right.
Burgoyne Bay.
Yes.
We should move on now. We've run out. We're running a little low on time, so move on to the to these other last ducks. And who's doing the bufflehead?
Oh, I guess I'll start. One of the smallest ducks, but easily identified by that nice big white patch on the head of the male, and we see them by the hundreds and hundreds all winter long, everywhere around Salt Spring, and we've had a high of I saw 957. We counted in 2015, and they're also cavity nesters up in the trees, usually farther north. I don't think there's any records of them nesting on Salt Spring.
They're often found or where we find American widgeon, and they'll be in and out and about. They're sort of, I always think they're a bit of chaotic. They lead a chaotic life. They the American widgeon are always together, and these guys will come landing near them and amongst them and cause a bit of chaos. They're fun.
Well, you know what? There's a method in that madness. They're actually practicing courtship all winter, and so that ruckus they're making, those are the males playing around with courtship displays.
Wow. I once saw one fly into a flock of widgeon and create a bit of a scene, and which was followed immediately by two widgeon escorting that bufflehead out. Like, let's get you out of here. You're not our kind. It was quite amazing.
It's important to note that they feed a lot on small crabs, and maybe the widgeons sort of disturb the crabs a bit, and they have a better chance. I don't know, but at least that's what they're feeding on, unlike the widgeons.
Kathleen, I think you've got the common goldeneye.
You do, and I've got the barrows.
Oh, okay, all right. I'll take. Oh yeah. Well. Okay, common goldeneye and the barrows are quite similar. They're cavity nesters, but the common, of course, has almost like a dot on his face instead of a crescent that the barrows have, and both commonly seen in the winter. On the Christmas bird counts, large numbers, quite large numbers. We have them on the east side of Salt Spring. The common goldeneye seems to be much more common, by the hundreds in the winter, and it seems like on the west side of Salt Spring, I think the barrows may be a little more common.
I would agree. Up here at Vesuvius the other day, there were 50 of the barrows, which is what you're seeing here with that white crescent. And I'd like you to note that in the very top of that picture is a female with a very yellow beak, yellow-orange beak. And once you see that female, it'll help you to say, oh, okay, these are barrows, as opposed to the common, where the females do not get that orange yellow beak. Another characteristic that I often use, if we go back, yeah, here we go to the common goldeneye, there's a lot more white on the body. And now advance to the barrows, if you could, David.
That's
Yeah, you see the white dotted, and then go to that next picture, which is much clearer actually. And where those white dots are, there's a black finger that goes towards the front breast, and that goes closer to the waterline. It is quite distinctive, I find, in helping me, because between the two of these at some distance, it's easy to mix them up.
These are both cavity nesters, and in the interior, it's really fun to watch them. They dominate a pond that may have breeding pairs of 7 or 5 or 6 different species of waterfowl. But boy, these guys are the bosses. And when that male Barrow's goldeneye comes patrolling around his pond, everybody clears out at his pond. So they're tough customers and very successful breeders in snags.
Okay, the hooded merganser.
Could I just add, Kathleen, the Burgoyne Bay, the First Nations name is Quackwam, which means female merganser.
Ah,
That's, you find them in the highest numbers in December and January.
Great.
yeah. So the hooded merganser, this is a female, or immature juvenile, very, very dull, quite a crest on the back of the head, and a very thin bill. This is characteristic of mergansers. So have we got the male hooded somewhere? Because boy, oh boy, this is a beautiful bird. Yeah, here he is. And what I love are the stripes going down on the flank there near the breast at the front of the bird. Lovely black and white. And then the crest. Now this crest on this particular bird is down. If he were to lift that crest up, the white patch behind the eye opens way up and is then clearly outlined with black, and a showy bird. Inland waters, also also on the shoreline, also in the ocean. At Ruckle, there are a couple of bays. If you go down to Ruckle and then head north along the coastline, there are a couple of bays where you can see all 3 of the mergansers. And it's a great way to yeah, here's another one. So Peter, that's yours, I think.
Yeah, the common merganser. You can identify the male very easily because he's predominantly white, the dark top, dark head, and he's our biggest merganser. The female, and this is a lovely picture because it clearly shows the female with that nice white patch, throat patch, and dark red head. And if you look at the red-breasted merganser, which are slightly smaller, you'll notice it's rather vague and indistinguishable where the red meets the gray chest feathers. And we have both are very common during the Christmas bird count. The red-breasted tends to be offshore more by the hundreds in the winter, and the common merganser likes fresh water. So we often see lots of them in St. Mary's Lake and Cushion Lake. And I should, one interesting thing about the common merganser, I don't know about the red-breasted in this case, but there's something called brood amalgamation. And I've seen this many times where a mother merganser has trailing behind her 10, 20, 30, up to 40 ducklings, little fluffball ducklings. And but they're still not sure exactly why, but it's either confused mothers or aggressive mothers that have kidnapped the ducklings from other broods. So, but anyway, it's wonderful to watch this long Congo line of ducklings. And when they're scared, the whole bunch just gets right up off the water and runs across the water in fright, but delightful to see.
Our bald eagle. And a couple of immatures beside them here. Another iconic bird, unmistakable. the immatures, possibly you have to note that there isn't the white head or the white tail. We've been looking for nest sites of the eagle around Salt Spring, and this is there's concern that when these big trees are brought down, and because it takes a tree of a certain height, of a certain age, and truly a big tree to support these enormous nests that eagles can build and need. And those old Douglas firs often will, the top, for one reason or another, or part of it, will be knocked off. And then this gives the possibility of branches going out to the side that can support the nest. Very important trees. We're hoping with the Salt Spring Naturalists to bring David Hancock over to the island at some point, possibly in the springtime. He is the naturalist in British Columbia who goes many years back in surveying the eagle's nests and where they are, a lot of it by plane. And it'll be a very interesting talk if we can get him to come over.
And you can look up webcams, eagle webcams, and look at some of the eagle's nests that he's been monitoring over several years. We're going to move right along, though, to the shorebirds. And we're fortunate that John has gotten together some of his excellent recordings. John is a professional bird recordist, in case anyone doesn't know that. So as we go along through these, John, can we get you to play a song? And the first one we're going to talk about is American Coot. And who's got that one? And then we'll move on.
I do. I get the Coot, little white bill, which is quite distinctive. If you see a bird, a duck in our waters, in our pond areas, mainly, perhaps I'm wrong there, the others can help me out, but that white bill, short, kind of chicken-like, and as the bird is moving through the water, the head and forward part of its body is going back and forth and back and forth. It's fun to see it. The foot, we can see in the picture here, is lobed. There we are. Yeah, it's out of the water. They will be in vegetation on the sides of ponds. We've had a couple up here in the ponds, down by the meadows, and they are around. Not commonly seen on Salt Spring, though.
Actually, going back to about 1994, for the next 10 or 15 years, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 of them every year. But then in more recent years, very few. And in the last 5 years, none.
Wow. And yet inland, when I was
sorry, that's we're still talking about the Coot. Forget what I said. That's the killdeer. One.
Okay.
Getting ahead of yourself.
Yeah, sorry.
Well,
recently I was inland in the Okanagan area down by Asuyas, and on Vaso Lake, literally we could count the coots on that lake in the thousands.
yeah. Well, let's move on to the killdeer. And your comment was they're fewer and fewer seen, but how do they sound, John?
That's when they're in flight on the shore or across farmland.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Rarely seen on Salt Spring, but again, in the ponds close by, we've had
Is the alarm call. Black.
Yeah. I've only seen one once here, the killdeer, and up on a pond nearby. However, down on our shorelines, we can see them perhaps more frequently, and certainly we can on the ocean. they have amazing nests. Basically, it isn't a nest. They will lay their eggs down on the beach amongst stones. And I once experienced this up by Miracle Beach near Campbell River. And every day we would go down to that beach to try and see if we could find again the nest and the eggs. The eggs look so much like the rocks. And every time we went down, the nest, we eventually found it, but it was hidden. It was remarkable. And then the killdeer will leave it as we got close, and it will go off and feign a broken wing. And that is truly interesting to see. It's trying to distract you and get you away from the nest. And it certainly does, because you're watching this bird that looks like it has a broken wing.
Kathleen and everyone, Nadine's pointed out that there's a killdeer ground nesting at the RV park on Tripp Road past summer. And on Booth Canal Road, right near the bridge, there's been a killdeer almost every year for the past 20 years during part of the season. So it's a good place to see them as well. What about this next bird, John? What would that one sound like?
This is the black oyster catcher, and there are a few pairs around Salt Spring along Trincomalee Channel. We've noticed them sometimes sitting at the fish restaurant at Vesuvius, and I believe there are still some at Fulford.
Oyster catcher.
Lovely whistle sound.
They get together in groups often this time of the year, so you may see several. They fly around and then they separate later on and start nesting. So winter is a good time to see larger groups of them, but you can certainly hear them often before you see them at all. So it's great to have them. There's usually a pair of oyster catchers on the boardwalk in Crofton if you go over there on the ferry. Thanks to Pierre, there's a plea for everyone to keep their dogs on a leash if anywhere near oyster catchers. They are very sensitive to disturbance, especially when they're nesting, but even just feeding. It's really important to keep dogs on a leash while walking the beach.
Yeah, one of their favorite nesting sites is the end of Walter Bay Spit, just south of the Sailing Club. And that's between the Sailing Club and Price Beach, and they nest there every year, every summer, without fail. And there's even a sign saying keep out and keep your dogs out. Don't even go near it from May through July. And surprisingly, not surprisingly, they're quite vulnerable with dogs, but also raccoons. And how they survive, I'll never know, with raccoons wandering the beaches all the time. But I noticed from the Christmas bird counts over the last 30 years that their numbers have remained somewhat the same in the winter. So I guess they're great survivors.
Holding their own. We'll move on to the next bird. And John, how does this black turnstone sound?
1 second.
Oh, that sounds like an oyster catcher.
It's still the oyster catcher.
The last of the oyster catcher.
Black turnstone.
Here we go. That's a nice trill as well.
Wow.
They like rocky shorelines. Some of them usually nest around Grace Point. We see them out at Nose Point sometimes. Often 20 or 30 in the flock.
In the winter on high tides, you would think, oh boy, it's going to be hard to find them, but they'll sit out the high tides on docks and floating logs and things like that. And I don't, when I'm out doing inventories by boat along the shoreline of Prevost and the outer coastal islets, I don't even have to look for them. I just listen for them. They're quite chatty and easy to identify by their call.
Turnstone.
I was just going to back up here to the oyster catchers, and Elena asks, why are the oyster catchers called oyster catchers? Do they eat oysters? And anyone want to comment on that?
Yes, actually, in that recording, I didn't comment on it, but at one point you could hear an oyster catcher pecking into a clamshell.
Yeah, on this coast, the black oyster catcher probably did eat the Olympia oyster, which is a small, relatively delicate oyster. And if you look for Olympia oysters, you find them mainly on the undersides of rocks. And that may be because there's a lot of predation pressure for those that are on the top. The oyster catchers, they can't eat a large oyster. So they're going to eat small oysters. And around the world, there's different species of oyster catchers, and they're probably all choosing at some point to eat some oysters, but they would have to be small and delicate oysters by comparison. So these eat mainly clams, but one of the favorite foods of the black oyster catcher here is chitons, the little muscular limpet-like, and limpets also, but the little mollusk that lives right on the surface of rocks and is it has the 8 bony plates.
Should just say small shellfish, I guess.
All shellfish, yeah. And this one is similar to that, and I don't think John has a recording of this one, but who has this bird? Somebody in our group. Oh, there's the blackbirds. Oh, I'm sorry, let me go backwards here. You can get John's wonderful recordings of at the Apple iTunes store. So I put that in here just as a plug for John. Thank you for sharing those, John. And people should know that they can get bird sounds from all across Canada of birds by just going into the Apple iTunes store. So we'll move on to the next bird.
I think that's mine, the surf bird. Actually, I see them all the time in the winter, but they don't like the shoreline of Salt Spring proper. So I think there's only two records in the last 30 years on Salt Spring and the Christmas bird count. But off the offshore islets, I can often see them mixed in with black turnstones. And they are quite territorial about their feeding habits in the winter. I can go to some islets, the rocky outer shore of some islets, and I can always find them. They're married to those rocks, and I just love the surf birds. But you'd have to go out to the Channel Islets off of Yo Point to see them. That's one place. Otherwise, the south coast of Prevost on the rocky islets there, and that's about it around here.
But if you do see a flock of black turnstones, look carefully, because often there is a surf bird or two in a flock of, say, 20 or 30 black turnstones. I think that's been my observation over the years.
If you're really looking for turnstone, surf birds, when you come out of Active Pass on the far side, on the stern or right-hand side of the boat, out from the lighthouse, there's a small rocky point, and in the water, and sometimes there are between 200 and 300 there.
Interesting.
Off Main Island, yeah.
Peter, let's move on quickly here. We're sort of running a bit over, so if you could just run through these, Peter, and give people a great idea to find to identify gulls, that would be terrific.
All right. What have we got here?
New gull.
Aha. We don't call him a mule gull anymore. He's a short-billed gull. as of last year. And he's easy to identify. He's much smaller, half the size of a glaucous wing gull, black tail feathers, and a small yellow bill. But he's now a short-billed gull, whether we like it or not. And of course, here's one of my favorites, the Bonaparte Skull. And I just gave David a picture of a summer Bonapartes. We see them by the thousands, literally the thousands in active pass in early spring. It's quite a spectacle. In fact, they even had a bird festival for many years on Maine and Galliano devoted to the Bonaparte skulls. Even in recent, well, I'd say a month ago, I counted well over 100 right in the outer Ganges Harbor. But anyway, we get they're normally recorded, a few of them every year at the Christmas bird count. This was Thayer's, now it's Iceland. This is also a recent switch in identification. We now call it an Iceland gull, but it's a little smaller than a glaucous wing, black tip tail, feathers, and a little smaller than a glaucous wing gull. But there are so many hybrids between glaucous wing and Thayer's and Western that it gets very confusing. But he does have a smaller bill than a glaucous wing gull, but a little tough to identify because there's so many variations. And of course, here's our most common, and with the gray tail feathers, the pink feet, and our largest. Surprisingly, we've had herring gulls counted in the first 20 years of Christmas bird counts, very similar to the glaucous wing. The glaucous wing on the West Coast is like the herring gull on the East Coast, but we do have herring gulls, but not in recent years. Anyway, that's the most common one.
Finally, the Alcids.
Finally, the Alcids. So the Pigeon Guillemot. Now, the bird on the left is what we see in the summertime and all around Salt Spring, out off the water, off the shore. It's quite easy to see this little guy. That white wing patch amongst the black is diagnostic, and in the winter we lose that bright color. It's a small Alcid, not as small as some that Peter's going to talk about, but it's tricky to perhaps identify, except for one thing. If that bird takes a dive, you're going to see those red feet, and which you can see on the left, and that is so cool when they dive and you see those red feet right away. You know you've got a Pigeon Guillemot.
Yeah, we have breeding colonies here as well on Prevost Island and Active Pass, and over on Galliano, and there's a nice breeding colony on the west side of Salt Spring Island, just north of Vesuvius. They like rocky cliffs, and I wish we had an audio because they have a delightful sound, and it's one of my favorite birds. And I do cover those breeding colonies all the way down as far as Mandardi Island and keep track of them. They're just delightful birds. They really are, and really fun to watch during the breeding season with all their antics. Marble murrelets, that's my favorite. When I first came here to British Columbia in 1963, they were in the millions in the ancient forests, nesting. They nest in the canopy on moss and lichen covered branches of the old growth ancient forests from Alaska down to California, but their numbers have declined by the hundreds of thousands with the slaughter of the old growth forests, thanks to the timber industry and successional governments over the last 30 or 40 years. It's really tragic. In fact, when I first came here, our naval architect at Island Tug and Barge lived on Salt Spring, and when he wasn't designing ships, he would be in the springtime off the coast of Salt Spring, frantically searching for their nests as they flew from the ocean up over Salt Spring. And in those years, nobody knew where they nested. And probably in those years, they did nest even in the Douglas fir zone of Salt Spring, in the big maples, which, as you know, have these lush green moss and lichen covered canopy branches. But they're all gone now. And sadly, they're still disappearing. In the winter, they're easy to spot because I don't even have to, I can just hear them. They have a lovely sound, and we see them always in pairs, and they're recorded by the CBC Christmas bird counters every year in small numbers, always in pairs around the island. Oh yeah, and it is a little easy. It's not hard. It's not hard to confuse them. The Pigeon Guillemot and the Marble Muralit both have some white flanks, but the Marble Muralit is a little more compact and a little less white, and a slightly different shape. But they can be confusing at a distance.
And the bill is pretty characteristic too.
Sure. Oh, here's another one of my favorites. Now, the ancient muralit is rarely seen on Salt Spring. In the last 30 years, you'll see very few records, but they're more common than you think, but they're usually well offshore. In fact, the other day, someone counted over 900 of them on the ferry boat going to Active Pass past Ruckle Park. Over almost 1,000 of them. So if you had a scope on at Ruckle Park a few days ago, you might have seen some. But usually a little farther offshore, the Channel Islets off of Yo Point, you might see them. But they small flocks of them. And unlike the Marble Muralit, these nest underground in burrows, primarily on the Queen Charlotte Island.
And finally,
common mure. Again, they're not too commonly seen, but there's enough records, Christmas bird count records every year. And we have major colonies in off the western Vancouver Island and to the north. And in, if we have a big run of surf smelt and herring and sandlands down at the southern end of the Gulf Islands, I'll count them by the summer. And they have this very distinctive call.
well, and although this doesn't seem to be an alcid and isn't, it's the final bird that we're calling a water or shorebird. And of course, it's the kingfisher. And I've taken this one since we didn't have it in our practice run. And it's, of course, a fisher extraordinaire, and you'll see them mainly by the water. And it has a sound which might come out right now. And you'll certainly recognize them probably well before you'll see them by their sounds. These birds always fly from perch to perch watching the water, and we're fortunate to have them in our front yard almost every day. So it's a great bird to have. And Mark has asked, what about the Christmas bird count? And what we're going to do is have a couple of bonus species, but we're going to talk about the Christmas bird count. So if anybody wants to leave at this point and is not interested in the Christmas bird count or the bonus species, go ahead. We'll just continue on. But at this point, I'd like to thank our narrators and presenters, Kathleen, Peter, and John, for doing such a great job. and for the photographers, Farley, Peter, and Ren Ferguson for helping with that. So we've really enjoyed having those narrations and pictures. And of course, a reminder, you can get John's birding sounds just by going to Apple iTunes Store and typing in John Neville, and you'll come up with the whole pack of CDs that he can offer you. So the bonus species, if anybody recognizes this, I was going to leave the title off, but these were seen last year, right? Not this particular one necessarily, but this species was found. And where were they found, Kathleen or Peter?
I'm not sure, but there were 3 of them. Hold on, maybe I've got a note
Maybe
here.
John knows.
Oh, they're greater white-fronted geese.
Or Peter.
Yes, 4 were reported last
And
December.
right in amongst the Canada geese that were hanging out at Central. So people should keep their eyes on. We see them occasionally around the Booth Canal area. White-fronted goose. And in fact, for years, we've seen one occasionally coming around. And these birds, again, we hear them more than we see them, right, Kathleen?
Yes, yeah. And mainly in migration, these are the cackling geese, and they cackle. Oh my gosh, when you hear them coming overhead in that V formation or whatever formation, it's a cackle. You can't mistake it. Yeah, cackling geese. I don't know how frequently they're found on the bird count, because I do believe they migrate. But John, Peter?
They're pretty
Any
rare.
comment? Yeah.
I know Farley reported that he had seen, I think it was a pair in amongst the Canada geese that were hanging out in the golf course and then down at the fields above at the end of Booth Canal. So it's possible that they're still around. People should watch for those. It's a difficult problem to make sure you know them, because they just look a little bit like a small Canada goose, and you have to really look for the characteristics pattern.
They're
I
more
don't think they've ever been recorded on the Christmas bird count.
Not been recorded.
No.
Well, this might be the first year if we get those Christmas bird counters out there. And this is one species that I've seen a lot recently, but not on Salt Spring, but I have seen them on St. Mary's Lake. And this is the northern shoveler. And it's an absolutely beautiful species. You can see them easily in Victoria. If you go over to the flats, what's the name of the flats there?
Panama
Flats.
Flats.
or
Yeah.
Martindale.
Martindale, they're just tremendous numbers of these. It's extraordinary bird. As you can guess, it's a mud feeder as well. And they're often they're just churning up the bottom of the ponds over there. So those are the bonus species. And oh, there's one more, Peter. This was one that Peter showed me. What is this, Peter?
Well, this is the Wilson Snipe, and he's also one of my favorites. In the interior, in early spring, he just his call at dawn is absolutely spectacular, and great memories of our Wilson Snipe. And he's here on the island. There very few are recorded at Christmas time, but they're here. And it's just a lack of not covering the right habitat, which is down in the wetlands and marshes. There are probably going to be a pair or so, or a few of these at Blackburn Lake at Christmas time, but nobody is sloshing around in the wet meadows, so he'll go undetected.
I have to say that when Peter sent me this photograph and told me about the Wilson Snipe, I was reminded of being a child, and somehow there was this story about these snipe hunts. Everybody talked about going out for a snipe hunt, but I always thought that it was a joke, and so I was kind of skeptical about Peter's statements. And then suddenly I found one of these on my right next to in the pond at our property. So I'm now a believer in snipes, and Peter, you're making me think about the lovely sounds in the morning. We have heard these sounds, I think, and so I'll have to check that with John, and maybe we've got snipes right on our property. It's hard to know, but they certainly exist, and this one was photographed right by our pond. Wilson snipe. So now we're going to just change pace a little bit here. And for those of you who are interested, there is the Christmas bird count, which is an incredible citizen science event. Maybe Peter could tell us a little bit about what it is and how it got started.
Well, it started in 1900. Those were the days when the birds were being songbirds and every species was getting slaughtered by gunners for market gunning and sport hunting. And some folks in New Jersey decided it's about time we started counting birds for fun, and let's do it at Christmas time. And this was the beginning of the Audubon Society, and it's grown every year to the point now where there are hundreds and hundreds of counts all over North America and beyond. I have a Christmas bird count in the Sierra Madre Mountains of central Mexico for 10 years. And I was the recorder for that count. And so they're so popular that everybody wants to get on board. And in Canada, we turn our records into the to Birds Canada, and then they end up at the Audubon Society. Sadly, Salt Spring, which should have its own count, has been split up by the folks in North Saanich who have claimed the southern half of Salt Spring, and the Galliano folks have claimed the north half of Salt Spring because they were on the ball 30 years ago when, I don't know, I think the few birders on Salt Spring were asleep, so they lost their chance. But anyway, our records all go to Audubon through Galliano Island and North Saanich.
Mm-hmm.
Peter, I think you should add, though, that the North and South Islands counts are put together and we eventually do get a count for Salt Spring as a whole.
We certainly do, and there it is. And it's Tim Marchant will send you this copy, and it's right up to date, 2020, and it has all the counts since 1989, and it's absolutely fascinating reading to see what we have on Salt Spring. It's a wonderful record.
And if people would like to get involved, can you, Kathleen, can you tell us a little bit about how people might do that?
Yeah, I sure can. So you would need to contact me, first of all, and I will, between you and me, will determine what zone you're in. If you can bring that map right back up again. There's my
I've got the two maps split. So the northern part of the zone, so it's here.
Yeah, so each one of these numbers represents a zone, and there's a zone captain for the majority of them. And I will put you in touch with your zone captain, who will then try and find out what area that you're able to cover if you be an experienced birder. Now, if you're not an experienced birder, we would be very pleased for you to join an experienced birder and go along, because it is an incredible learning experience. You may be involved in spotting birds or perhaps even marking them down, but it's a day when it's a serious day, and the counting goes on really quite quickly. But you just learn so much, and so we'll connect you with someone if we can. And we start out early. You can even count owls through the evening hours. It's 24 hours on December 19th. And then we start early in the daytime for the birds that can be seen diurnally. So there's my email address. We invite you to join us.
Okay, so I'm sure anybody out there who wants to participate, if you're a beginner, you can maybe go out with others. There's obviously some pandemic COVID issues, but it's an outdoor activity, and we can wear masks if we're going to be in contact with each other closer than just distanced. And it could be a wonderful day. Hopefully the weather will be good. And the date for that is December 19. Am I right? Is it?
It
That's
is.
Correct. That's a Sunday and is coming up 2 weeks from tomorrow. So thank you all for participating tonight. We hope to get more people involved, and we hope to see you a bunch in the spring putting on events, and we'll put out the call for volunteers and memberships in the early spring. So thanks again. Have a wonderful evening. Sorry it went on a little longer than we planned, but
Excuse me, David. Don't forget tomorrow.
and that was meant to be this final one. See you tomorrow at 3 p.m. for Birds of Forest, Meadows, and Backyards. Thanks again so much, and good evening, everybody.